everyone, this is going to be a quick sort of guide to Hades, simply because obviously it's just, well, not very recently, but reasonably recently been released on Xbox. So this is just a few sort of tricks and tips for somebody jumping into the game for the first time. I'm going to give you a quick overview of what weapons I personally think are best, and a few things that you should try and do just to make your playthrough a little bit easier, because it is quite a challenging game. The first thing I will say is, if you're literally just planning to play through the game simply for the story and not really want to be overly challenged, because I will say that a lot of the runs, even when you've played a lot of the game and you've got a lot of the upgrades, is still very difficult. So the first thing I'd suggest, if you are that kind of player, is to turn this on, which is something I did not learn about until quite a way into my playthrough myself. And initiating this basically means that every time that you die and you get sent back to the fountain, it will give you a little bit of a damage increase. I think it's something like 2% every time you die. So every time you come back through here, you'll gain a little bit of damage resistance, which obviously means that you will be able to get slightly further every single time, because you'll just simply have that damage buff, making damage reduction buff, making that slightly easier. The second thing I will say is, make sure you talk to everybody in the house, especially once you get the fishing rod. Talk to the chef to get your increased stuff. One thing I will never say, that will always say actually, is never ever trade out ambrosia. Like here, you can trade ambrosia for 1 Titan blood. You can do it if you like, but it's not really worth it in my opinion. Because Titan blood is obviously what you use to upgrade your weapons. So on that thought, I'll just run through and well, actually, I might as well do the mirror first before we do the weapons. So this is obviously where you spend the darkness that you complete within each run, gain within each run. The biggest perks that I'd say are like the most useful for sure is Catatonic Vitality. That just simply gives you extra lives every single time. So that means you can have up to 3 extra lives, so you're not basically solely dependent on that 1 life, which getting through Hades with 1 life is, even with God mode on, I think is basically impossible unless you're like extremely good at the game, and even so I think you'd struggle. Thick skin again is another one, and don't forget that you can turn these around, so you basically have good skills and you have bad skills. Well, that light and dark skills would be a better way to put it than good and bad, I guess. Greater reflex is very, very useful too. Ruthless reflex is also kind of useful, but I'd say that greater reflex is better because you have an additional dash within quick succession. So you get basically 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And dashing in this game is paramount. Like, it's basically the thing to avoid damage. Like, there's no parrying, there's no blocking, so it's all down to your dash basically. Thick skin, I would say, is also a decent one to get because it basically just gives you more health. Family Fortune, these ones are slightly less important, I guess. I mean, Fated Authority is quite nice. Fated Persuasion is also nice. That basically means that you can change the what type of room that you get on certain doors, and that basically means you can change the boons that you get. So they're both sort of equally good, but the ones I suggest definitely going for first would be Death Defiance, Chronic Vitality, which just gives you that extra bit of health. Oh, I got confused actually, sorry, I said it gives you more lives. What I meant was Death Defiance. Chronic Vitality actually gives you a little bit of health every time you leave a room, which again is useful. The other one basically just increases the amount of darkness you get instead. So I'd say that health is probably more important, especially if you're going for that first run, that first finishing run. Deep pockets again is another good, decent one to get. So I'd say that basically these 5 here. So chronic vitality, death defiance, greater reflex, deep pockets, and thick skin are definitely, in my opinion, the first 5 that you should go for to max. Just simply because deep pockets gives you more money, which obviously means more boons, more equipment, more health. Thick skin gives you that initial health buff. That gives you a little bit of rejuvenation of health every time you leave a room, and death defiance obviously gives you more chances to complete because it gives you more lives. So all 5 of those, in my opinion, are like the key to get. You might be tempted to go for the damage buffs, like Shadow Presence or Fiery Presence. They are good, but the big thing is that striking foes from behind or striking undamaged foes. So undamaged foes is probably slightly better than striking foes from behind, although using striking from behind is quite a big thing in this game, because literally, like I said before, you do just dash, 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 dash. That's your go-to, your key for avoiding buffs damage. Good old Skelly. In terms of weapons, which I think are best, which I think are worst, my personal favorite is the shield. With the which one is it? I think either the aspect of Chaos or the aspect of Zagreus is the best. The aspect of Zagreus essentially just turns you into Captain America. You can just, but the big advantage is that you can block all incoming damage using that, and then you can turn it into a strike. So what you can basically do is you can sit there and you can actually block damage, block damage, block damage, which is a big thing in this game. It is the only weapon you have which you can block with. And because you get that bull rush, what you can basically do is just sit there and you can tank the damage, take the damage, and then boom.
That is a priceless work of art there, pal.
And obviously you can move it around, so it's nice because you can literally take the enemy's attacks coming in and then dash into them and then follow up with a decent amount of attack. The downside is that it only blocks in the direction that you're facing, so if you've got multiple enemies around you, you kind of have to spin to defend the damage, which, I mean, it does work. I'd say the second best one is this one, the aspect of Chaos, because the thing is when you wrong button. When you charge for the bull rush, you do a bull rush and then you can do a multi-throw, which means that you can basically bull rush in and then throw. So it's basically, this is an upgraded version of Zagreus. But Zagreus does have additional damage to the attack and the dash strike. So basically that does more damage when you use Zagreus, but with this one you have the sort of AoE effect afterwards, which is quite decent for crowd control, which is very key in these games. The second one that I would say, like the second best weapon, is definitely the spear, just because you've got that range, you can keep people at distance. With this particular aspect, you can basically throw it with Y, and then you can use it to, if you press Y again, then you can jump to where it is, so you can use it like another dash almost. You can sort of move around and then dash, and then use it like that, which is quite nice. The other aspects that you get with it are Zagreus, so special damage and range and speed, so that's quite nice. Hades, I've never actually really found a massive use for that. That is also quite nice, but the problem is that you get basically you get lifesteal, but your health and healing is reduced. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, that one. I'd say that probably the aspects of Achilles, I think it is, yeah, Achilles, is probably the best one to have. Like the Zagreus, Special damage is quite nice, but that one having instead of basically you can charge that up and use it for extra damage, and then like I say, you can also use like an extra dash. With Zagreus, you do have the advantage of having that extra damage and also the charge swipe. I think. Yeah, you do still have that. So basically, what the aspect of Zeus does? Is it Zeus? No, sorry. Hades. Yeah, the aspect of Hades. Basically, what that does is increases that damage to that swipe. But the big thing about the spear, in my opinion, is that you can get certain boons for it, where basically you start doing like tri-attacks and stuff, and it's just great for keeping the distance. And it's very quick to use, and like I say, you can almost use that like a second dash. It's very good at crowd control. The sword,
And we're back.
I don't know, for me, number 3 is taken between the sword and the bow. Simply because the sword is quite nice. It does have more range than you would think. This particular aspect allows you to do a thing called hollow ground, which basically means that you, I think you heal, as far as I remember. Oh no, you take damage reduction while you're in the aura, which is quite nice. Nemesis basically gives you more critical chance. That and the original sword gives you additional attack and movement speed, like most of the aspects of Zagreus do. They give you additional attack and movement speed, or attack damage in some form, which is quite nice. But generally, these ones are better. The aspect of Poseidon is never one I've really used particularly, but it is quite nice because it allows you to get your crystals back without actually killing an enemy. You also have like a sort of AoE smash, which you do have with all of them, but the dash strike is going to be your key in this, I find. Just literally the bow is quite nice, especially this particular aspect, the aspect of Rama. You can sort of fire multiple at once. The downside of the bow, in my opinion, is that your main attack is charged and you have no protection while you're like this, so you have to sort of like really dash around and just sort of very quickly pass off shots, which is why this aspect is quite nice, because you have that Y, which you tend to end up using more than your X. The initial one isn't that great. I mean, it's got more of a range and it is a bit of a crit whore for sure, so that can be nice, especially if you're doing a crit build, but that's kind of dependent on what you get. Aspect of Hera I've never really used. I don't think it's particularly useful. The aspect of Charon is to an extent, but it basically means that when you use that widespread attack there, they all seek the last thing you hit. So that can be useful, but the problem is that that is a really nice sort of crowd control method. And if it's all basically aimed in on one person, it doesn't do that. So I'd say personally, yeah, the aspect of Hera, not Hera, sorry, the aspect of Rama is the best for the bow, if that's the way you want to play. I'd say the boxing gloves are quite nice. The dodge chance isn't really worthwhile, so I'd suggest definitely getting one of these. I haven't actually got the last one for this yet. The magnetized attack, so the Talos, I think is possibly the best, because you've got that pull to on your Y, so you can literally pull an enemy into you and then hit them. And then, because the big problem with the boxing gloves is range. It has roughly the same range as the sword, but because you hit in a sequence, they do very small damage for single shots. and that is really nice for pulling people who are just trying to get away, and you can just boom, bam.
Never felt so alive.
You've also got that dashing upper attack, which is really nice. Dash in, and then you pull them into you. Bam, 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 boom, bam. So they're also quite nice. I'd probably place them like on, well, if not on par, then definitely very close to the sword and the bow, in my opinion. The gun, or the rail as it's called,
Forge created you.
I really don't like this weapon. Therefore, for me, it is the worst weapon. It's not very nice to use. It doesn't really have very much.
Ready, Exegriff?
It doesn't really have very much utility, really, in my opinion. Just because you can actually run out of ammo, and you have to let go of the attack button to reload. And the problem is, when you run out of ammo, that reload animation really can't be done on the fly very well. Now, it does have quite a nice Y attack, because you've got a very widespread AoE for that particular one. Well, you do for all of them, but they don't really have very good bonuses for themselves, if you see what I mean. Like, it's just basically bonus damage, that's all you get from it. And although I could see that it could be useful, it's not great. It's not great. My fastest time was done with the spear, as you can see, 17 minutes 16 seconds. The highest heat that I've gone is 9. To explain heat levels to those who don't know, basically after you escape the first time, not to spoil the story, but basically you get given this pact, which basically means you have to take certain debuffs to get the same rewards. So obviously at the moment I'm not actually quite on heat gauge 9, so I'd have to take something like that, then I'll be in heat gauge 10. But the heat that you escape at is actually tied to the weapon you use. So for example, with this one, the highest heat I've done is 7, so I could do a level 8 heat run with the shield. With the sword, which I don't use very much yet, you see the highest heat I've done with that one is 4, so I could do a level 5 heat with that. You'll notice that sometimes one of the weapons is glowing. That basically means that you'll get more darkness for the run if you use that weapon. So, and gems, you get 20% of each, as it tells you at the bottom of the screen there. So that is useful to try and use the weapon that it's telling you to use, just simply, especially in the beginning, for that initial darkness buff, just because that's obviously how you get your abilities that I was explaining before. Now, these are really useful too. You definitely have to make sure that you get some of these. The way you do that is by basically giving nectar to... Oh, I can upgrade that. To the various characters in the game, like Charon and the gods, and also Hades and Persephone and everybody else. And even Skelly to a certain extent. So out of these, I'd say probably the best ones to get for sure is probably the coin purse, which is Hypnos, which is I think that is, if I remember correctly, that is the guy who is at the front here. Let me just double check this. Yeah, so basically you just give nectar to this guy. So generally when you've finished your run, you're coming through, just bung him a nectar. You can only give 1 nectar per time that you run through to each character. So like, make sure that if you're planning to really sort of grind through that to get all the voice lines and everything and the explanations in story, then you want to go around each one of them and give them a nectar every time you come in, including that guy and her and Meg and everybody, basically. Or you can obviously trade your nectar off with the green blobby dude to get various other stuff. So yeah, back to the boons that they give you. I'd say the coin purse, which you get from Hypnos, is very, very useful, because you basically get 150 coins at the very start of your run, every time. The next one I'd say was probably Skelly. Yeah, Skelly's Tooth is quite lucky, because it basically gives you 100% 100 more health when you die. So every time you use one of your revives, basically, that increases the amount of health you regain when you come back to life, which is very useful. So I'd say those two are probably the most important ones to get early because of what they give you. The rest just generally give you sort of damage buffs and certain things. That is also quite useful. It gives you an extra level to a boon every 4 encounters. So that's also can be quite useful. But one thing to remember is if you are, or that one actually as well, the Odd Spike Collar, which is basically by giving nectar to Cerberus as well. That just gives you an extra health buff. But yeah, as I was saying, if you are really wanting to get a certain boon early, the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is by actually owning one of these boons that come from one of the gods. So for example, say you wanted to get Athena's dash in the beginning, which is a very useful dash to have. Well, a lot of Athena's abilities are useful because they deflect, so you can have deflect on an attack strike, or you can have deflect on a dash, which I think personally is the most useful. It's one of the best dashes you can get in the game for certain, like dash buffs that you can get in the game. So it's quite useful if you run that boon that comes from that person. They are the first person you'll encounter in the first room. So say for example I took the Owl Pendant, then I would meet Athena in that first room, which is kind of handy. Or if I wanted to, say, get the Thunder Strike, so extra lightning damage coming off my attack or whatever, I'd take the Zeus boon. And you can kind of tailor that to how you want to play and what boons you want to get early on to sort of lock off. So I'd say probably one of the best ones for that is definitely take Athena, because having that deflect is extremely useful, because you're basically dealing damage back at the opponent. I would say there are more useful buffs to take. And basically the way you level these up, by the way, is by taking them and then using them for a certain amount of kills, and then they level up. So it's worthwhile doing for all of them, because they all do have, you know, utilage depending on what kind of run you're wanting to do. But I would definitely say that Skelly's Lucky Tooth, Cerberus's Old Spiked Collar, and Hypnos's Chthonic Coin Purse is definitely 3 to get early game, and they're easy to get as well because they're all in the house. It's not like you have to well, basically beyond the luck of RNG to talk to the right person to be able to give them the nectar. Later on you can start unlocking these as well, which is when you've increased your love for a person enough. I'll just quickly explain what I mean by that, which is where's the book? There we go. Yeah, basically the amount of hearts that you have with a person is how many times you've given them nectar. And the more you upgrade that relationship, the more of these voice lines you get, the more of the story gets filled in. And there's one for every character, basically. When you get this little lock thing, you won't be able to give them any more nectar until you increase where you are in the game, basically. And basically the same happens for your weapons as well. The more you use them and the more you kill people, the more will get filled in the journal. So that is a very rough guide of how to play, I guess. Like I say, I would suggest, if you're just jumping into the game, definitely take the shield or the spear, because both of those are very, very easy to use, and I just think outweigh everything else, in my opinion. Like I said, don't forget to talk to everybody. Don't forget to play your heart, because there is an achievement that you get for doing that. Don't forget to collect your quests, obviously. And obviously check which ones you've got and how you can complete them.
Each failure brings new opportunities for self-reflection.
Okay. Just to give you a quick overhaul of these, I definitely suggest getting the shrines as quickly as possible. I'm not quite sure where they are in here because I've already got them. But they'll be under work orders, basically. At a certain point, you just start getting basically pure cosmetics. It is what it is, but I definitely suggest getting the shrines as early as possible, simply because of the fact that they just sometimes kind of come in so handy when you're sat there with like 10 health, and you're not really wanting to face the next room, and then all of a sudden you find a shrine and you're back to full health and you're just sorted. So yeah, they're definitely the most useful things to get, I would say. Also, the Infernal Troves can be useful as well. But yeah, definitely try and get the Fountain Chambers first, I'd say. If you're going to spend, you know, diamonds or gems on anything, try and get those first. And I think that's about it. As far as I can think, for now. So yeah, that is basically a beginner's guide to Hades. I will maybe do another video explaining more on the sort of combat side, because like I said before, that double dash is extremely useful, and the way you utilize that is quite important. People basically do call this a button mashy game, because in essence it is. It's basically, if you saw the way I was sort of fighting with Skelly before, obviously he doesn't attack back, but essentially the way you want to do it is you want to keep moving and utilize everything you have at your disposal. Make sure to get yourself a decent cast as well. That's for your B button. And definitely just try to utilize that dash strike. If you can really get that sort of AX combo down, that is going to be hella useful for you in combat. Just standing there and doing that isn't really as useful. You really want to be using the charge abilities and X in combination with either your dash or using hold X. And then generally what you want to do is just keep people at range as much as you possibly can, because literally the way this works, in my opinion, is that you have to have at least 2 lives left for Hades. You just have to, or you are gonna fail. Because I have never really, I think I managed to beat him like once when it took me 1 life. But I think that was an extremely lucky run, because I just happened to have the right weapons and the right boons and everything else. I definitely suggest that you read all the boons as well, like I say, because you can read what they are in the codex as well. It explains the boon list for each god, so I'd suggest going through that and basically knowing what they all do before you jump in. So I think that's going to do it for this video. I hope you found this informative even, and that you guys have a great day. See you soon.